Jack Thompson had always believed that life was best lived by the water. A lifelong angler with calloused hands and an infectious passion for the great outdoors, Jack spent his weekends casting lines from the weathered deck of his beloved boat, the Sea Breeze. Nestled behind his modest lakeside cabin, a haven decorated with fishing trophies, family photographs, and vintage nautical maps, the Sea Breeze wasn't just a vessel. It was a symbol of freedom, a repository of memories from childhood fishing trips and quiet dawns on the lake, when worries seemed as distant as the horizon. Every detail of Jack's property had meaning. The sprawling dock he built with his own hands, the carefully maintained boat slip, and the serene stretch of water that mirrored the sky were all testament to a life well lived and hard earned. It was his sanctuary away from the bustling city, a place where every ripple and breeze told a story. But tranquility in the neighborhood was about to be disturbed by an unwelcome force. Enter Kerren Leland, the self-appointed queen of the local homeowners association. With her perfectly coiffed hair, immaculate blazer, and an air of entitlement that preceded her wherever she went, Kerren ruled the HOA with an iron fist. To her, every property was a canvas that needed to conform to her rigid standards of order and aesthetics. And nothing irked her more than what she considered unsightly deviations from the norm. One sunny Saturday morning, as Jack prepared to head out for a leisurely day on the lake, a sleek black car rolled into the cul-de-sac. Out stepped Kerren, flanked by a couple of equally stern-looking board members. With a clipboard clutched tightly in one hand and a rehearsed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she marched up to Jack's dock. "Mr. Thompson," she announced crisply, "it has come to our attention that your boat is in violation of community guidelines. The Sea Breeze is deemed an eyesore in our pristine neighborhood. I'm here to correct that." Jack blinked in disbelief. "What do you mean, Kerren? This boat has been part of my family for decades. It's not just for show. It's my livelihood and my passion." Kerren's smile tightened as she retorted, "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson. We expect every homeowner to maintain a certain standard. I suggest you either modify the boat to better fit our aesthetics or relinquish it entirely." The words hung heavy in the humid air. Jack's heart pounded with a mix of indignation and disbelief. He had always prided himself on being a good neighbor, contributing to community events, and respecting the neighborhood's traditions. Yet here was Kerren, waving her authority like a blunt instrument, determined to force him into submission. In that tense moment on the dock, the first crack in the community's calm surfaced. Neighbors peered from behind manicured hedges and tidy lawns, murmuring amongst themselves about yet another overreach by the HOA. Jack felt both the sting of betrayal and a fierce surge of resolve. His boat, the Sea Breeze, was more than just a piece of equipment. It was a piece of his soul, a tangible link to his past, and a beacon for his future. As Kerren turned on her heel, promising to return with further instructions and a final warning, Jack stood rooted to the spot. The morning's golden light now seemed tinged with foreboding. He realized that this wasn't simply a matter of a boat or a violation of arbitrary rules. It was a battle for the very essence of his freedom. And if Kerren thought she could dictate what was acceptable in his life, she had another thing coming. Determined not to be bullied into compliance, Jack resolved to fight back. That very day, he began planning his counterstrike, knowing that the integrity of his home and the sanctity of his treasured traditions were at stake. With every fiber of his being, Jack vowed that no one, not even the imperious Kerren, would rob him of the simple pleasures that made life worth living. The next morning, Jack awoke to an unwelcome surprise. Taped to his cabin's front door was an official-looking envelope embossed with the HOA's insignia. Inside, a crisp letter detailed a steep fine of $750 for improper display and noncompliance with community aesthetic standards, specifically targeting the Sea Breeze. The language was formal and unyielding, a bureaucratic decree meant to crush any spirit of resistance. As Jack stepped outside to read the notice in the cool early light, Kerren was already waiting on the sidewalk. Standing tall in her signature blazer, arms folded with a haughty expression, she greeted him in a tone that brooked no argument. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I trust you received our notice. Our community standards are non-negotiable, and your failure to comply will have consequences. Jack's jaw tightened. Kerren, I operate my boat for fishing, the way I live my life, and it doesn't disrupt anyone's peace. The sea breeze is part of who I am. But Kerren's reply was icy. The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Thompson. I suggest you correct this violation immediately or further measures, including additional fines and legal actions, will follow. Refusing to be cowed, Jack calmly explained, I'll be filing a complaint with the local zoning office. I assure you, I'm well within my rights to enjoy my property and my boat. Kerren's eyes flashed with indignation as she responded, You will do as the HOA dictates, Mr. Thompson. Do not test our patience. Later that day, Jack visited the local municipal office, where a sympathetic official reviewed the case. The verdict was a resounding affirmation of his rights. There was no law prohibiting him from using his boat as he wished. Empowered by this confirmation, Jack began meticulously documenting everything. Photographs of his boat gleaming on the water, video clips of peaceful mornings on the lake, and even interviews with neighbors who supported his right to keep his cherished vessel unaltered. That evening, while the community gathered for an informal meet-up at the local park, whispers of Kerren's heavy-handed tactics spread like wildfire. Stories emerged of fines issued for everything from improperly placed potted plants to unauthorized use of outdoor decor. The atmosphere was thick with discontent, and Jack found himself at the center of an emerging grassroots movement against arbitrary rules. As the sun set over the lake, casting long shadows across his property, Jack sat on his porch reflecting on the day's events. The fine was more than just a financial hit. It was a declaration of war against the very principles of freedom and individuality that defined his life. With determination burning in his eyes, Jack vowed that this was only the beginning. He would stand up not just for his right to fish in peace, but for every homeowner whose unique character was being suppressed by an overreaching regime. In the days that followed, Kerren's tactics grew bolder and more vindictive. The initial fine was only the opening salvo in a campaign designed to force conformity at any cost. Anonymous violation notices began appearing at doorsteps throughout the neighborhood, each more ludicrous than the last. One resident received a citation for unauthorized aquatic aesthetics, simply for having a colorful rowboat bobbing on the lake. Another was reprimanded for excessive charm in their outdoor decor. Jack, meanwhile, kept a careful log of every infraction Kerren's office levied. Late into the night, by the light of a single lamp in his study adorned with fishing memorabilia, he pored over community records and meeting minutes. What he discovered was a pattern of abuse. Kerren and her cronies had been using the HOA as a personal cash cow, imposing fines for the most trivial deviations from an imagined ideal. It wasn't about preserving the neighborhood's beauty. It was about wielding power. One evening, during a particularly tense HOA meeting held in a drab, fluorescent-lit community hall, Jack took the stage. With a thick folder stuffed with evidence, photographs, video clips, and testimonials from emboldened neighbors, he addressed the room. What we're witnessing isn't about protecting our community. It's about controlling every aspect of our lives. These fines, these threats, they're nothing but a means for a few individuals to impose their will on the rest of us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some board members exchanged nervous glances, while others began whispering of hidden accounts and secret meetings. Kerren, visibly rattled but desperate to maintain her grip, dismissed Jack's claims with a curt, "Your evidence is circumstantial, Mr. Thompson. Our rules are clear, and you must abide by them." But the seeds of dissent had been planted. Over the following days, more homeowners began sharing their own stories of arbitrary fines and unexplained penalties. Jack's investigation uncovered discrepancies in the HOA's financial records, suggesting that a significant portion of the fines was being funneled into personal accounts rather than community improvements. Armed with irrefutable proof of corruption, Jack ramped up his efforts. He installed discrete cameras at key points around his property, capturing every encounter with the HOA's enforcers. He even managed to record a heated exchange with a board member who privately admitted that Kerren had taken liberties with the funds. Each piece of evidence added to the growing chorus of dissent. A community united in its outrage against an authoritarian regime that cared more about appearances than fairness. As the conflict escalated, the atmosphere in the neighborhood grew charged with a sense of impending revolution. What had started as a personal dispute over a treasured boat was fast becoming a battle for the soul of the community. And Jack Thompson, with his steadfast integrity and unyielding commitment to his way of life, was emerging as the unlikely leader of that rebellion. The tension reached a breaking point on a humid summer afternoon when Kerren decided to stage a community fishing tour, an ostentatious display designed to flaunt her so-called commitment to neighborhood harmony. In a brazen act of hubris, she commandeered the Sea Breeze from Jack's dock, claiming it was temporarily borrowed for the tour. With a posse of HOA members in tow, Kerren set off to demonstrate what she called the proper way to enjoy our local waters. Jack, who had been in the midst of repairing his aging fishing rod collection, was alerted to the commotion by frantic calls from his neighbors. Racing to the dock, he arrived just in time to witness the surreal spectacle. Kerren, decked out in a mismatched fishing vest and a pair of oversized sunglasses, was leading a parade of reluctant residents aboard his stolen boat. The irony was palpable. A boat that symbolized freedom and cherished memories was now being used as a prop in Kerren's misguided quest for control. Fueled by a mix of indignation and determination, Jack resolved that it was time to reclaim not just his boat, but the dignity of his entire way of life. That night, as the moon cast a silver glow over the still, restless water, Jack hatched a plan that was as unconventional as it was symbolic. He retrieved a set of old, rusted tools and, working in the quiet solitude of his workshop, began modifying the Sea Breeze. With deliberate precision, he drilled a series of small, strategically placed holes along the hull, holes that were just large enough to cause a slow, inevitable leak without damaging the boat's overall structure. By dawn, the sabotage was complete. The Sea Breeze, now subtly altered, retained its familiar shape and appearance. No one would suspect that beneath its gleaming exterior lay the seeds of its own undoing. When Kerren returned later that morning to resume her pompous fishing tour, she found the boat seemingly intact. Confidently, she set sail with her entourage, oblivious to the treachery hidden beneath the surface. As the tour commenced, the first signs of trouble appeared. At first, it was a mere inconvenience, a trickle of water that the boat's crew dismissed as a minor nuisance. But soon, the leaks began to multiply, and what had once been a symbol of pride and tradition transformed into a vessel of chaos. Water seeped steadily into the cabin and deck, and despite frantic efforts to bail it out, the situation worsened by the minute. Back on shore, Jack watched the unfolding disaster with a quiet, determined satisfaction. His calculated act of sabotage was not born out of malice alone. It was a declaration that no one, not even Kerren, could dictate how he should live his life. The leaking boat became a metaphor for the crumbling facade of the HOA's authority. With every gushing burst of water, Kerren's carefully constructed image of order and propriety sank a little further. Within hours, the chaos on the water had become undeniable. Shouts and splashes filled the air as Kerren's fishing tour devolved into a frantic scramble to save the sinking vessel. The HOA members, once so confident in their ability to control every detail, now found themselves at the mercy of nature and of Jack's quiet, resolute defiance. Desperation breeds rash decisions, and Kerren was down to her last gambit. With her authority already tarnished by the spectacle of the leaking boat and the viral video clips now circulating on social media, she resolved to stage one final act of control. Early one chilly morning, as fog rolled in over the lake, Kerren assembled a small contingent of HOA enforcers and, armed with stern legal documents and the threat of immediate legal action, she marched to Jack's property. Her plan was as audacious as it was misguided. Kerren intended to seize the Sea Breeze outright, this time not for a fishing tour, but as evidence of Jack's repeated noncompliance with community regulations. She claimed that the boat had become a public nuisance, endangering the safety and aesthetics of the neighborhood. With the help of a couple of local law enforcement officers, who had grown increasingly skeptical of her previous antics, Kerren attempted to forcefully remove the boat from its mooring. Jack, alerted by the commotion, arrived at the scene with a calm but unyielding demeanor. Standing on his front porch, he watched as Kerren and her cohorts tried to assert control over the sinking wreck of his boat. "Kerren, you've crossed every line," he said steadily. "This isn't about community standards. It's about you trying to bully me out of my own property." Before Kerren could retort, the sound of approaching sirens punctuated the tense air. The police, now well aware of Kerren's pattern of overreach, arrived to assess the situation. As they reviewed the evidence, a series of security camera clips and witness statements documenting her unauthorized actions, it became clear that Kerren's attempt to seize the boat was not only unjustified but illegal. In the ensuing chaos, Kerren's final desperate move unraveled completely. Caught red-handed on camera and unable to justify her actions, she was forced to retreat, her authority shattered before the very eyes of the community. The police, sympathetic to Jack's plight, assured him that further legal action would be taken against anyone found violating his rights. The fallout from Kerren's botched seizure of the Sea Breeze was swift and transformative. The neighborhood, long chafing under her authoritarian rule, finally found its voice. In emergency meetings held at the community center, now packed with resolute homeowners, the collective outrage reached a crescendo. Evidence of Kerren's abuses, from arbitrary fines to her latest reckless act, was laid bare for all to see. Under mounting pressure, several board members, once intimidated by Kerren's iron-fisted approach, began to distance themselves publicly. In a historic vote that reflected the true spirit of the community, the residents unanimously ousted Kerren from the HOA board. The decision was not just a political statement. It was a resounding declaration that the community would no longer tolerate tyranny in any form. As the news of Kerren's expulsion spread, local media picked up the story. Headlines blared about the leaky boat scandal and the fall of HOA tyranny, capturing the imagination of the broader public. The viral videos of a sinking boat, of Kerren's desperate attempts to reassert control, became emblematic of a corrupt system finally being brought to justice. For Jack Thompson, the victory was both personal and communal. He had not only reclaimed his boat and his property, but had also sparked a movement that restored the community's faith in fairness and individuality. As neighbors gathered on his newly reclaimed dock to celebrate, the air was filled with laughter, applause, and the unmistakable sense that a dark chapter had finally closed. In the days that followed, the newly elected board instituted sweeping reforms. Policies were rewritten to celebrate the unique character of each property, and oversight mechanisms were put in place to ensure transparency and accountability. The very principles that had once been undermined by arbitrary rules were now being championed by a united community. In the wake of Kerren's dramatic downfall, the legal ramifications for the HOA became inevitable. A coalition of disgruntled homeowners, led by Jack and bolstered by months of documented abuses, filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA. The suit charged the board with mismanagement, fraudulent fines, and the systematic abuse of power that had suffocated the community spirit. The courtroom became a battleground for justice. One by one, homeowners took the stand to recount their experiences. Stories of outrageous fines for improperly moored boats, baseless citations for unauthorized maritime decor, and invasive inspections that crossed every legal boundary. Jack's meticulously compiled evidence, from security footage to handwritten affidavits, painted a damning portrait of a system built on intimidation and greed. The presiding judge was unyielding. "No one is above the law," she declared. "This court will hold the HOA accountable for its blatant misuse of authority." In a series of swift rulings, the court fined the HOA heavily and mandated a complete audit of its financial practices. Several board members, implicated by the overwhelming evidence, were ordered to reimburse the community for the funds misappropriated over years of abuse. For Jack, the legal victory was the final seal on a long-fought battle. In a press conference following the ruling, he stated, "This isn't just about a boat or a fine. It's about reclaiming our community from those who would treat our homes and our traditions as expendable." His words resonated with homeowners far and wide, inspiring similar actions in neighboring communities previously cowed by the same oppressive regulations. With the HOA dismantled and legal judgments piling up, Kerren Leland's personal world began to collapse in tandem with her professional empire. The lavish lifestyle she once flaunted, a collection of designer outfits, an upscale condo in the heart of the neighborhood, and an array of luxury vehicles, was suddenly unsustainable. Creditors started calling, and foreclosure notices arrived at her door. Public humiliation was relentless. Social media and local news outlets replayed the infamous video of her desperate attempt to seize the sea breeze, a moment of complete, unfiltered defeat. Once revered or feared as the enforcer of community standards, Kerren now became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and entitlement. The final blow came on a cold, gray morning when Kerren was spotted shuffling into a modest office building far from the neighborhood she once dominated. Humbled and isolated, she had accepted a position as an assistant property manager for another, much smaller HOA, a role that left her no room to reassert her former authority. As she passed by familiar streets, former residents exchanged glances and whispered, "That's what happens when you try to bully your way to the top." Jack, witnessing the full circle of poetic justice, couldn't help but offer a quiet remark to a passing neighbor. "I hope she enjoys following orders for a change." His tone was gentle yet triumphant, a final acknowledgement that the era of tyranny was over, and that accountability had finally been served. In the months that followed, the once oppressive atmosphere in the neighborhood transformed into one of genuine camaraderie and mutual respect. The painful memories of arbitrary fines and humiliating confrontations gave way to renewed hope, a community united not by enforced uniformity, but by a shared love for the individuality of each home and heart. Jack Thompson returned to his life by the water with a new sense of peace. The sea breeze, though still bearing the scars of its sabotage, was lovingly restored and once again became his vessel of freedom. On quiet mornings, as he set out onto the lake with a soft glow of sunrise reflecting off the water, he was reminded of the hard-fought battle that had reclaimed not just his boat, but the dignity of an entire community. At a celebratory block party held on the refurbished dock, neighbors gathered to honor their victory. Laughter mingled with the gentle lapping of waves as someone produced a playful violation notice for excessive joy on the water. Jack, accepting the faux citation with a wry smile and a twinkle in his eye, declared they really tried, but in the end we reclaimed our lake, our homes, and our freedom. As the party wound down and twilight descended upon the neighborhood, the lingering echoes of past struggles blended with the promise of a brighter, freer future. In that serene moment, Jack sat on the dock's edge, watching the stars reflect on the calm water, a quiet reminder that while tyrants may rise and fall, the true spirit of community endures. Fade to black.